Welcome to another episode here at the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast. I hope you guys are doing fantastic. And once again, I thank you for tuning in to another episode here at the MHS Podcast. And today's episode, oh man, I love talking about this subject. You guys already know. And at the beginning of me starting this podcast, it was always to talk about, the truth in male enhancement, right? And I had none other than AJ Big Al Alfaro on the show to discuss just that, right? He is a recognized leader in the male enhancement industry with in the past 2 decades, he's helped thousands of guys reach their male enhancement goals, from increasing size, stamina, to quality, and so much more. And, girth, anybody here in the girth department? Like I've said before, it's big for the ladies, so... He's a guy that specializes in helping other dudes basically reach their goals. And what I loved about the conversation that I had with him is that he basically broke it down and he talked about it from a place of honesty, right? And that's the thing that I loved about his approach, is that he makes a program for you to follow. And one of the things that he emphasized is that you don't need all kinds of crazy equipment. You guys know me, I've dropped more than $1,000 on this stuff because, hey, you know what? I'm at a place where I kind of need to get more in my gym, so to speak, right? But he talks about how at the very beginning, you don't need anything. And that's the one thing that I've gotten in my Instagram feed as well. You do not need anything other than your hands, discipline, and maybe a little bit of lube. And he even talks about how the gel isn't a necessity all the time and how you can make certain programs without, a lot of the exercises that we see that, are crucial. However, he breaks it down and talks about how you don't necessarily always got to do it in this way. The man has been helping people out for over 2 decades. So believe you me, he has a wealth of knowledge that, for me, like I said before, I love this subject and I love getting the truth about this subject out there, which is kind of why I'm so passionate about it, right? Because there's a whole lot of crazy gimmicks and a whole bunch of crazy stuff that everybody's trying to sell you. You don't necessarily need it. However, there is a way and a time, and obviously, certain techniques will require these, what's the word I'm looking for? Tools, so to speak. But he talks about, the foundations, about how you should implement, different things into your regimen. And like I said before, man, he's a coach. He's a coach that's been doing this for a long, long time and has helped thousands and thousands of guys reach their goals. So, he's been everywhere, Mel Magazine. This guy is a legend. So be sure to check him out. And he is the man behind Me Coach, right? MaleEnhancementCoach.com. Make sure you check it out. And make sure you click the description that I've added in the link below. All right, without any further ado, let's go. Penis enhancement may seem like a difficult endeavor. However, Me Coach makes it simple. We all know the best way to reach your goals as fast as possible is with a coach. Me Coach offers you just that by giving you an individualized, tailor-made plan specific to your needs. Me Coach has helped thousands of clients improve erectile quality, increase penis length, penis girth, and has helped men improve their sexual stamina to last a whole lot longer. Me Coach is about actually helping you every step of the way in your penis enlargement journey, unlike many of the crazy gimmicks you may see online. What sets Me Coach apart is the approach. First off, you will get your program created for you by AJ Big Al Alfaro and his team of trusted professionals who have been helping men in the PE realm for decades. They put their expertise into making your program. By using Me Coach, you will have AJ every step of the way to make sure you're exercising safely and effectively to reach your goals. Me Coach focuses on seeing you get to where you want to go in the safest, most efficient way possible. Me Coach also helps men suffering from abnormal curvatures in their penises by using specialized techniques to straighten things out. If you are ready to take your penis enhancement to the next level, you can totally try it out now, risk-free. Now, if you get started, It will start off with a new client interview, customized routine to achieve your goals, me coach progress log, access to over 30 exercises, 10 routines, safety guides, one-on-one personal penis training, and a 60-day money-back guarantee. So be sure to check out Me Coach by clicking the link in the description below. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode here at the Masculine Health Solutions Podcast. Today, I got a living legend. I got Alfaro. Al, how are you today, sir?
I'm doing okay. How are you? It's good to be here.
Hey, man, I'm doing fantastic. Blessed to have you on the show. And
Thank you.
like we were talking about off air, first thing, I want to ask you right off the bat is, what got you started down the road of PE?
I get that a lot. It's an interesting story. When I first started on this voyage, I didn't have the intention of becoming a male enhancement expert. It's kind of like it picked me. You go back in time, mid-1990s, I was a young guy in my 20s, was looking to become an entrepreneur. So I started getting into the how-to field, how to sell information and whatnot. So I wrote about what I knew about, which was steroid-free bodybuilding. So I'd come up with a course. It worked pretty well. And in my research during that time, I'd gotten a bunch of magazines, like bodybuilding magazines, whatnot, and looked through them. And I noticed that in those magazines, there were a large number of ads for penis-related things, like penis pumps, there were penis surgeries, and things like that. So I was thinking, I thought to myself, what if there were a natural solution as opposed to a surgical, even device-based solution to penis enlargement? So I started doing some studying, and I used myself as a test subject. There was back then, there wasn't too much information on the internet. There were some things, but there wasn't that much, especially not as much as there is now.
Yeah.
So I tested myself. I did a little research, as much research as I could, and I loved it. I mean, the feeling I got from this type of training. I've done things like Kegels before, but when you start doing things like stretches and jelks and whatnot, and just a feeling you get afterwards, it's like some guys, compared to like a bodybuilding pump, there's a similarity there. It's like, you look down and you see yourself bigger than ever. I mean, and that could be addicting. It was just really fun. It was fun. I loved the process. I was already in great physical shape, which I think is missing from most men's routines. And we can get into that later. But thankfully I was in great physical shape back then. Cardiovascular conditioning was never better. And that helped immensely. It's like everything I did, when you're in great shape, everything you do as regards that works so much better. So I love the results. And when I started promoting the free program, and back then it was just a little course. It was interesting when I started promoting it, and I added it as a free bonus to this bodybuilding book. About every 10 emails I got, 9 of them were asking about the male enhancement book. So I was kind of sucked into it, to be honest with you. And there were some times in my career where I almost got out of it and got it into other ventures, but it kind of pulls me back in, like they say. So I'm still here today. I'm still helping. I've been privileged to be able to see a lot of changes, especially during the early part of the internet, the 1990s going into the 2000s. I was witness to there being almost no information to when the forums really got, like the internet forums really got rolling back then. It was just an explosion. You had thousands of guys experimenting and adding to the body of knowledge. And then we went from a scenario where there was nothing, almost nothing, to now there was just so much information about it that it became confusing, which is one of the reasons why I started a coaching program, just to try to get guys off on the right foot when they get started with their training, and for advanced training and things of that nature.
That's super interesting, man, because
awesome.
It does seem like, we live in the day and age of information, but now it's like it's been convoluted. Like there's just so much all over the place. So it's like, I don't know what's real. I don't know what's not.
That's true. Misinformation, disinformation, it exists everywhere. It exists everywhere with just about every subject. So it's important to have really good sources. But one thing I found too that's very important with this type of training is to take clues from yourself.
Yeah.
And And what's really important too is, and a lot of guys who are into other types of training will recognize the importance is to keep a journal. You have to. For this type of training, you have any type of training you're serious about, you should be keeping a journal. I mean, I know there's some people out there who like to freestyle, and there's some guys who are very advanced and they do their own thing very instinctively, and that's fine. But I found that a journal, you can not keep a journal, but you can keep one anyway. Keep one anyway, because there's no harm in doing so. And if you wanted to look back a year or so into your training and see, how far you've come or what worked better, things like that, you had that data available as opposed to not having it.
100%. What are the biggest physiological indicators that you think a lot of guys should be paying attention to?
Yeah. One of the stats that I use universally when it comes to training, and it's a barometer for so many different functions, is erection quality. Erection quality is a term that we give to a combined measure of hardness and stamina. What you want to do with your training is you want to set up your initial workouts, similar to gym training in some sense. You set up a workout cycle where your initial workouts are fairly easy. They're not gonna tax you. You're gonna come up feeling great. You're gonna feel worked, but it's within your capabilities. At that point, as the weeks pass in the beginning of the cycle, your EQ should be going up. You'll have little fluctuations in there, but the overall trend of progress should be upwards. You'll know when you're starting to get to the point where you're going to need some rest, when your EQ starts to plateau. And you want that to happen later in the cycle. It's like peaking for training, for any kind of training where you work towards a peak in physical condition. You want to hit that peak towards the end of the cycle. And that's where your EQ gains and even your size gains may start to plateau. And it's not a bad thing. It's because you're meeting your conditioning requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And then what normally happens after that is you take like a week off or so, get that deep level of rest and recuperation. You reset the cycle and start the process over again. And, of course, with the objective in the next cycle to hit another peak, a slightly higher peak, hopefully. And that's how you keep going. But erection quality is a huge one. You want to see your erection quality going up over time. Soreness, this type of training is not like other forms of training, and most of it, with the exception of exercises like Kegels or whatnot, most of it's passive. You're stretching. You don't want to induce pain. Pain is never a good thing with this type of training. The most you should experience, and that's even if you're very advanced, is perhaps a tolerable level of discomfort. Anytime you feel pain, especially sharp pain, never try to get into that, because there's no need for that. There's no need for that for this type of training. But soreness, if you're anything more than, say, a little bit sore, and if your soreness lasts for about 24 hours, it's a sign of overwork. It's a sign you're just doing a little too much to recover. Spots. There are little tiny pinpoint bruises that people get. And if you've ever lifted weights like heavy deadlifts or whatnot, you probably notice that in your body. That's from internal pressure, hemodynamic pressure. So if you're doing exercise like jelks or squeezes and you notice a little spots, as long as they're smaller than pinhead size, and they go away in 24 hours, you're good. I wouldn't worry about that. That's probably going to happen. But anything bigger than that, it's a sign you're putting too much pressure. And of course, trying to build upon that, you won't allow the spots to dissipate. They'll just get bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
So those are some good ones. Another one that can happen with long-term training is loss of libido. That's especially if you're ejaculating too frequently.
Yeah.
When you're training, it's important. I tell guys this because there are some aspects to this training that involve edging exercises, which is, essentially you're simulating sexual activity via controlled masturbation, which you definitely shouldn't overdo that. And if you're sexually active, you probably wouldn't need to perform any manual edging anyway. But another thing that's really, really huge that I tell clients as regards training is frivolous ejaculations. You shouldn't be masturbating. You can have sex, of course. I mean, you should. But if you're having a lot of sexual activity, then you may want to hold back on any kind of manual edging. Also, let's say you're very sexually active. Let's say you're going through a honeymoon phase, or you got a partner who is just very sexually active, very fit. You might even need to take extra time off in between your sessions. Let's say, like, normally you train 4 days a week, you might need to cut that back because that, that sexual activity is very much like training. And, you're probably you're not gonna want to have sex 5-6 hours a day or however long you have it if you go through that and don't want to do penis training. You're not gonna need that, you probably won't be able to do it anyway.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
But if you, most guys I've talked to in that scenario, they're not worried. They're not upset that they're having so much sex, so they're okay with it.
No, that makes sense. But it's kind of like, I guess, well, it's like you said, 2 different stages, and it's almost like I've been there too, where it's just like, man, I don't know, I feel like I'm just overworked at this point. Just when you tax the body too much, it almost seems like, it's not going to function the way that you need it to. Yes. And one thing I did implement, but give me your take on decon breaks. How would you recommend taking a deconditioning break, and how long do you recommend taking it for?
That's a great question. I would say you should take at least one good long decon break a year. I recommend 2 weeks. For most guys, 2 weeks is great. Sometimes 2, sometimes 2 decon breaks a year is fine. If you feel like taking more than a couple of weeks, do it. If, and I think all training should follow some kind of, even like an informal yearly cycle where there's part of, where there's part of the year where you do maybe different things that are fun, maybe take a step back from what you usually do. And that it makes you more excited to get back into the normal rigor, so
yeah.
Let's say, maybe 10, 11 months out of the year, you're following a routine, but for that 1 month, you're either taking a break, or maybe you're just experimenting with something totally different that you wanted to, but you didn't have time. So that, that would be the time for it. Rest is not a bad thing. And you grow during rest. So I can understand the logic that men have, thinking that more is better. If I just keep training forever, continuously, it doesn't work like that. You have to rest. And for not only male enhancement, but for other forms of training, I found that, sometimes the best gains will come when you've had a protracted period of rest. I can give you an example that's not related to male enhancement, but I remember when I first started weight training. I was a kid. I was 14 when I first I started dabbling in that, and I got to the point where I was training 5-6 days a week. And at that age, I was like, I'm just trying to do bodybuilding routines. And I mean, in spite of that, I made some decent progress, but nothing really spectacular. Mostly gains in strength, which is great. But when I was during the summer, when I was 15 going on 16, I hurt myself, and I had to take a few weeks off from weight training. Funny thing happened though. Several weeks later, I had added 10 pounds. And when I came back and started lifting, it's like the weights felt like styrofoam. Like, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
I gotten the rest that I needed. I came back, and I followed that. I changed my workout routine, and I, maybe cut the volume by half. And I was finishing my workouts in like, 45 minutes, which you're supposed to do when it comes to the natural body. You're not, natural bodybuilding training, you're not supposed to train for hours and hours. It's not good for you. And I customized it. It taught me so much. Rest is good. Rest is where you allow for not just recuperation. You need to recuperate, but grow. And that's what it's about. And so a decon break once, twice a year, 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more. That's what seems to work.
No, 100%. I mean, I took one last year in about August when I was just swamped with work and everything, and I think I went for about 3 weeks, but you're 100% right. Like in that time, I found that, I didn't really lose any gains per se. But more than anything, psychologically, it kind of just, it set me up for like, you come back stronger, you come back rested, you come back feeling great.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I think everybody kind of needs every now and again. And even for bodybuilding too, it's always recommended. Like, I think it was Ronnie Coleman even, who's obviously geared up and all that, but he was talking about how he would even take, like, after a bodybuilding show, after 4 months of hard training, he'd take 2 weeks off.
I started, and it's funny because I started studying up on that. When that happened, I really started examining the aspects of training where rest was required, and that made a huge difference. And when I was a kid, that made a huge difference in my early training. I started incorporating layoff breaks, which I hadn't done before, and my my gains just started taking off because you need that rest. And it's not even just a physical thing. A lot of it's mental. I mean, I'm sure you've been on some routines where you've been doing the same routine for months, and you get to the point you're just disgusted. It's like you don't even want to think about that routine. But something in your head says, well, go to the gym anyway, just do something a little different. And even just changing up an exercise, you feel great because it's different. You got the workout in, you even targeted what you wanted to, but you did something a little different. It was fun. And your mind recognized that difference. And, sometimes, you can do that with this type of training as well.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
But I recommend sticking with a routine for as long as it works. And if it doesn't work anymore, you can tweak things. You can attempt to tweak things. And if that doesn't work, then it's just time for something else. Don't I tell guys, don't get married to a routine, because things will change, you will progress.
Yes.
For example, the jelk exercise. The jelk is such a universal exercise. It's very interesting. I don't, outside of male enhancement, I don't think anyone's even heard of that. You would have tell them about the jelk. They, ask you, what is that? But it's a phenomenon to where I will tell guys to perform a routine that doesn't include jelking, and some of them they get worried about it. It's like, whoa, no jelking? Hey, but I'm supposed to jelk. And it's like, well, you don't always have to. So one of the routines that I like to recommend for advanced guys, I called it the jelk free routine, specifically for that, because I wanted to emphasize it's a good routine. Even though there's no jelks in it, it's still a good routine. And so just getting used to trying different things to push your limits. What I like about the jelk-free routine is that you use exercises that isolate specific axis. The jelk is a great exercise, and it's very useful for different aspects. It's a good general exercise. Done the right way, you can add length, you can add girth, you can even improve EQ.
Yeah.
And the first time I ever read about the jelk exercise, it was before I had gotten on the internet. I think I was 19 years old, but it was in a book on sexual fitness. And this book was describing the exercise. They didn't even call it the jelk. They called it a milking movement. And they were recommending it for men who had moderate levels of ED. It's like you milked the penis to train it to become erect, to shunt more blood into it.
Yep.
So they weren't even discussing it as an enlargement movement, but I remember reading about it. So it's interesting. It's interesting how long that exercise has been around in some form or another.
And you know what? When it comes to the jelk too, the thing is, initially when I tried it, and I was doing like I always go back to JP's 9-day program, and but man, I found that I guess how old was I? I was like 22, 23, maybe younger. But for me at that age, combining that with jelking, man, my EQ was like, man, it was horrible because it was just hard all the time, or then I would try to end the session with like a never-ending edge session, and half the time, I was ejaculating afterwards. I'm like, oh man, it's like there was almost no control. It was just almost too much, like too powerful, at that age. But now I see the purpose of it, if you're a little bit older and stuff, and even I'm 33 now, but now it just kind of helps again to just restore that rigidity and kind of that vigor that you had when you were younger. Yeah. And performance-wise, yeah.
That forced tissue expansion, that's what's necessary. You're not going to make gains in size unless you get that deep tissue expansion. And of course, the best way to get that is to jack up your EQ as high as possible, so that everything you do with your male enhancement training is just pushed to its limits. Yeah. And even for stretching, I know a lot of guys don't regard EQ as being very important for stretches, but they are, because you still have the recovery factor. You still have blood flow. You still have, and there's still tissue expansion. When you're stretching the penis, you're not just stretching that suspensory ligament. You're also attempting to stretch the shaft itself. And of course, anytime you've had a rock hard, whether you call it a skin splitting erection, you're going to feel it not just girth wise, but lengthwise. So you want that every time you train. You want what we call that skin splitting erection, where like that erection feels like it's so hard, and like a steel pipe. If you can induce that every time you train, you're going to force gains. You can't not gain in doing that.
That's 100% true, because it's almost like I was reading about megaphallus and people that suffer from sickle cell anemia. Mm-hmm. And it was talking about that for the guys that would achieve megaphallus, it was almost because they had those skin tearing erections that were like, into another level. And because of that, it kind of just forced the expansion. It forced it to grow entirely, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of thing with PE too that I noticed. It's almost like I want to emulate that, right? And just kind of force it to just grow, right? And I can't do it if I'm doing a half-assed workout or just kind of floppy the whole time. you
No.
know
It is interesting you brought that up, that phenomenon. I remember when we started talking about it in the forums, and again, that's in the late 1990s. And I wrote about megalophallus. I was very careful to tell guys, even with a warning, I said, before you read this, don't take this as an instruction manual. Because I had, inevitably you would have guys say, hey, how do we induce priapism? You don't want priapism,
yeah.
but what you can do is you can mimic under very controlled conditions
Yes.
some of what is experienced during that, which is of course that forced tissue expansion, that very very powerful flow of blood coming in the penis. You can attempt to duplicate those type of conditions under very controlled and safe scenarios. Yeah, priapism is not something you want to do.
No.
Most guys who get priapism don't get megalophallus. Most guys who get priapism and who leave it untreated have very nasty
side effects.
Yeah. And they, to my understanding, when someone has priapism that doesn't go away, I mean, the treatments can range from cold water enemas to draining the blood out of the penis with a syringe. So again, don't play with that kind of stuff. Don't play with that. Try to do things the healthy way so that you don't hurt yourself. So you can train the next day and not be in the hospital.
Well, that's the thing, is that I was reading about a bunch of young kids and they were taking Viagra, and they weren't doing specifically for that reason, but they're just, I'm going to take this and it's going to be bigger, better, whatever. And long story short, some of them got ED just because like they fried it up and they had venous pooling and they were too scared to go to their parents, too scared to do anything about it. So it just kind of like all that, there was no circulation, right? And it just kind of numbed everything. And I'm like, dear Lord, man, like, so no, I mean, I never recommend that stuff. And I think priapism is something that you should avoid.
Yeah, avoid priapism.
Yeah. But when starting a program, Al, what is it that you usually try to go with? Like, what's a foundational way? Because I know everybody's different, and depending on what their goals may be, what is it? How would you kind of base your programs around? Like, is it mostly a manual thing? Do you use extenders? Like, how would you go about it?
Yeah. Well, what I like to try to start guys off on are pure manual routines, and that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think the last thing someone wants to do, wants to hear when they sign up for a course is, well, now you got to spend more money. Exactly. So by keeping things to manual training, as long as you have hands, you can train. So that's one of the reasons why. Also, there has yet to be a device invented that can match the versatility of the human hand. So, I mean, there's so many different things you can use, do with your hand. There are some advantages with devices, like for example, hanging. If you hang with 2 pounds, you're going to get 2 pounds every time you hang. Whereas when you're pulling, you don't know quite what you're going to get. So there are pros and cons to each method, but I like starting off with manuals because they're easy. You're not bothered by having to buy more equipment. And you can use it at any time. You don't need to really prep for it. You wash your hands when you're done.
Yeah.
But as far as how someone starts, a lot of that will depend on the response to what I call it. When I have a client sign up, the first thing they're instructed to do is to fill out a new client interview. And that interview, they ask, questions on their experience levels, even on their fitness and whatnot, because that's very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
So how they start off will be dependent on what they're looking to do and their current level of training experience, if any, and physical conditioning. Now, of course, with what I do, the scope is limited mostly to just male enhancement stuff. Although when it comes to getting maximum results, I urge guys to make sure they're doing stuff outside of their male enhancement training to make that possible. And the best thing you can do, and I get asked this a lot, the best type of training you can perform in conjunction with a male enhancement workout. And I always go to cardiovascular training. I know a lot of us don't like cardio or whatnot, but the penis runs on blood. If you have a very strong heart, you're going to have a lot easier time maintaining erections, maintaining, all of that with a high level of cardiovascular development. And when I first started training, and at that time I was in the military, I was a soldier. So, I was assigned to a unit where we did a lot of cardiovascular activity. And, I even back then with my training, I didn't love cardio, but I couldn't deny the effects. I was at a very low body weight, but also, and even though I was trying to go for muscle gains, I didn't like that too much. But the fact was that the sexual side effects is incredible. Early mid-20s, high levels of testosterone, superb aerobic conditioning. You can't beat that. So it's like anything you do in that scenario is going to be really good, as opposed to if you have one of those things missing. You can't do much about age. That doesn't mean that if you're older, you can't make gains. But understand you may not have quite the vigor you did in your 20s. Now, that doesn't mean you can't improve. It just means you have to perhaps adjust your expectations. And I could be wrong, because there's some guys out there in their 50s who perform like 20-year-olds. So it really has to do with not forgetting those foundational things. And most athletes, I have kids now who are into athletic things, and a lot of people want to find out secrets. What's the secret to this?
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that much of what your success depends upon with this type of training and others are those boring foundational things. High EQ. How do you get high EQ? You could train Kegels, you could train edging, whatnot, but you're not going to get a very strong heart lying on your back. You're not going to do that. If you want to strengthen your heart, you need to be, vigorous activity. And it's one of the reasons why I tell guys too, if you're very sexually active and you have a very fit sexual partner, that's a workout.
Yep.
And if you get with someone who has that level of physical conditioning and you don't, guess what's going to happen after some time? That your heart starts pumping and you can't keep up. You start breathing really hard because it's aerobic. It's an aerobic session, and if that starts happening, your penis is not going to be able to keep up. So the best option would be to try to do what you can to prevent that from happening. So you prevent that from happening by developing a high level of cardio. And so I understand most guys, we don't want to be triathletes, we don't want to be marathon. That's fine. You don't have to be, but if you do get yourself to a high level of cardiovascular fitness, it's going to improve your results drastically, as opposed to not doing it.
Yeah.
There's just no way around that. That's something that, again, I can give you the best routine. You can follow your diet, but if your physical foundation is not good, you're going to have problems. It's like trying to build a house out of, wet mud. You need that foundation. You need it.
100%, man. And that's kind of the one thing that I tell guys too, because they ask me, they're like, hey man, is there a magical pill, whatever? And one thing I always go into is like my story where I always tell them, I'm like, hey man, when I first started this, guess what, man? I bought these pills. They were $500.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And they called me good, man. But the one thing that I did get out of it was the extender. And that extender was what actually helped me kind of make gains. And I was like, wait a minute, there's some truth to this. And that's what set everything else apart. Cause I was like, however, the one thing about using the extender, it was a clunky extender. It wasn't very comfortable. But that being said, it's just kind of like, if I didn't put the work in, if I didn't strap the thing in, if I didn't use it, I wouldn't go anywhere. Right. And it kind of just came into having that mindset of like, what, you have to put in the work, and everything is connected in the body. Cause, if you're not in shape, you're going to feel it, man. You're going to feel it. It's going to feel completely different. And I've been there. And the one thing that I was just reading recently about was like type 2 diabetes and how circulation is not the greatest, right? So because of that, your toes and your penis, may not get as much blood as it needs. And because of that, you may have to amputate the toes. And for the penis, it'll start to atrophy a little bit. And, obviously erectile quality will suffer along with, giving you rectal difficulties.
Wow. Yeah, that comes into play. And I'm glad you mentioned extenders, because devices are, I do recommend them in certain cases, especially if you've been doing manuals for a while and you want to try something different, or you just want to go in that direction. Interestingly, extenders, there's not much in the mainstream when it comes to male enhancement. You can imagine, it's an industry-based thing, and if there's not billions of dollars, but what is interesting though is that the research that there is, even in places like PubMed.gov, and the literature actually talks about
the journal of
gains made
urology.
with extenders. It's documented gains made with extenders. But and I think extenders are good. Normally, what I would recommend is this: if you're going to, there's like a hierarchy, at least in my opinion, when it comes to devices. If you had to ask me if you had to go with a device, what would you pick first? I would go with a pump. So why? I mean, because pumping addresses everything. It addresses length, it addresses girth. It can help you with your EQ. It's fun to use. If you get conditioned enough, you can see awesome expansion just within the session. So those are all good reasons. Hanging would be the next immediate item on the list. Hanging, awesome for length. I'm not going to say it doesn't do anything for girth, but the focus isn't on girth with hanging, it's length. So you get precision there. Hanging you can vary it. I mean, you can use very light weights for a long time, or you can use relatively heavy weights for shorter training sessions. Extenders are good in that for guys who seem to get better results with higher volume, lower intensity routines. And they're out there. There are guys out there who don't make gains doing anything else, but when they do things like extender work or all day stretches, then they start making gains. So, I mean, I know it shouldn't be, but like, if you're familiar with working out, some guys will do radically different workouts. It shouldn't, you'd think, well, muscle fibers or in this case, fascia or whatnot, soft, like a smooth muscle tissue, shouldn't it all react the same? It should. In a perfect world, it should. In a perfect world, everyone does the same thing and they get the same results, but reality is very different. So there are some guys who extenders work very well for, especially for their lifestyle. But how you use it is very important. It has to be used in a initially prudent and then a progressive manner. You have to keep trying to push those limits every day. It's even if it's just a little bit. And that's one of the things that I recommend to clients is like, when I recommend rep increases, like, sometimes it's like add 1 rep per session. It's like 1 rep, and it doesn't sound like much, but over the weeks that builds. It's like compound interest. You don't want to add. It's like working out. If you went in and you could say bench press 100 pounds, I wouldn't tell you, well, tomorrow when you come in, let's try 150. You can barely do 100. I wouldn't tell you to do it. No, I'll tell you maybe, 102.5 or something like that. Just little tiny increases. That's how you do it.
Well, that's kind of the same approach that I have as well, because I think the way I see it too, it's like always reach for that low hanging fruit and then progress your way up. And it's the same deal as working out. And I always bring up the same analogies because it's true. It's like, you wait till you plateau and then you level up, but you don't necessarily need to be like, okay, you know what? Today I bench 300 pounds. Tomorrow I'm going to bench 400 pounds. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's always super progressive. Like, progressive overload is all about that. It's all about, but it's about doing it in a way that makes sense and in a way that you avoid injury too, because that's the other thing that you'll see. I know. I imagine you've probably seen on the forums and stuff too, where a guy just kind of overdoes it and he goes from like 5 pounds to 10 pounds and hanging, and it's like, dude, that's a bad idea.
Stuff, yeah.
Or buddy starts to get blisters in his glands and that. And I've seen a couple of guys too, like that I've been talking to, and I'm just like, well, you got to vary it up and you got to make sure that you take the right protective measures too. But you can't just, you just can't go from one extreme to the other.
No, you ease into it. And as I said, look, and I tell guys that you want those initial sessions to be easy. You're testing things out, and the thing that should be paramount is technique, form of the exercise. This isn't. I understand, like in weight training, like even in powerlifting, lifting a little loose with a little loose form, that's not bad. But you don't want to use loose form when it comes to penis training. You definitely don't want to overdo. Yeah, I mean, I see that. I see, with weight hanging or pumping or even simple exercise, you see guys that get on there and they do 10 minutes of joking. It's like, I never joked before. I do 10 minutes of joking. Why does my penis hurt? Or why you did 10 minutes of something you've never done before? I tell you to start off with 40 reps. 40 reps will take you like a minute to do it. Very light. Again, and it's the initial workouts. You shouldn't be challenged by your initial workouts. You should be using those initial workouts to work on things like technique and to establish a good baseline where you start from. That's so you set the staging. It's like maybe like the first few days of training, It's like, well, you're testing things out, and you always err on the side of caution. So, that
Yeah.
way, look, you can always add. You can, if this workout wasn't that good because it wasn't hard enough, what, the next workout you add a little bit more. But you can't take away. If you've overdone it with a workout, you can't go into your next workout. I'm going to do negative weight. No, you've already, the damage has been done. Now you have to rest. Now you got to recuperate. So, always starting off, erring on the side of caution. And I know that's boring for people, because everyone wants to, well, I want it now. I said, well, if you don't prepare, then not only are you not going to get, best case scenario, you don't make the quality of gains that you could because you're not training correctly. Worst case scenario, you get hurt.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of, I tell guys all the time that too, because they'll ask me like, hey man, how soon is it going to take for me to make gains? And I'm like, bro, don't think about, don't look at it like that. Almost look at it more like it's going to be a journey and you're going to make gains along the way. And these gains aren't going to be overnight because they just aren't. Like, you'd be hard pressed to find a dude that's not going through puberty that's going to go and put 20 pounds of muscle on at the gym. It's just not going to happen, or get into spectacular shape and increase his VO2 max overnight. It's something progressive. And that's the one thing I always preach about too, where it's a lot of people want to make the gains instantaneously. And I'm like, well, if that's a road you want to go down, I'm like, there's surgery.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I tell guys too, I said, because sometimes like to take too conservative approaches, like, well, it's going to take me years and years and years. It doesn't have to be that way either. If you train correctly, and you put certain things first, the things that most of us don't want to, which is, again, conditioning. That's,
yes,
you cannot technique your way out of conditioning. If your EQ is at a 10, try to get it at a 10 plus. I tell guys this, and I have guys who come to me and I give them stamina work to do, and they'll say, well, I don't need stamina work because, my sexual performance is fine. I said, that's fine. I said, but for the purposes of enlargement training, you have to go, when it comes to EQ, you have to go above and beyond what you think you'd need for even spectacular sexual performance. That you have to keep raising the bar on EQ because that is the engine that drives growth. And I know that's a lot of guys see EQ training as like, something they kind of throw on at the end of a workout. It's like, I don't have to do it, but it's not realizing that is a very fundamental part of the workout. If you can do stretching and whatnot, but if you don't have EQ, you're gonna have problems making gains. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
I don't see that. I don't see, this is coming from someone who trains, lots and lots of guys. And the one consistent thing is if the EQ improves or the EQ is very high already, you almost always going to see really good results as compared to the opposite. I guess the most dramatic results you see is, and from my experience, is that you'll see guys who come in not very good shape, but then over the course of weeks, your EQ starts to improve a lot. That's when that's when you start seeing the gains at the same time. Usually when you see a good rise in EQ, you'll almost notice a good rise in measurements as well.
That's interesting. Could you tell us a little bit about like a success, like a client story about somebody that might have come in, he's kind of lackluster, and how you kind of helped him get into, or basically make the gains that he wanted, or really get into that next level?
Sure. One of the things, and we haven't touched on this that much, but this is also a very important part of it, is a psychological aspect of training. So I would say some of the most impressive will come from guys who come to me because they have performance concerns. And in most cases, those performance concerns are psychogenic in nature. Now, I'm not a doctor, so I don't give medical advice on that, but there's a lot of data available. And you ask these men, what their experiences are and what they're feeling, during these encounters that lead them to believe that there's problems. And it's you ask these guys their questions like, are you still getting morning wood and whatnot and things like that. Most of these guys, there's nothing wrong with them physically. It's it's that mental perspective, the way they see themselves, and tackling that is one of the ways to see improvement. If you go into training or sexual performance and your mindset is one where you're anxious or you're nervous or upset or whatnot, your penis is not going to work at its best. Your penis is an organ that doesn't like conflict, so to speak. You want to be comfortable, you want to be relaxed, and that's one of the things I tell guys when they first start training. In conjunction with their stamina training, there's an exercise called emotional visualization exercise, where before you even start training, leading up to it, you want to set that emotional backdrop to one where you are feeling unencumbered. You want to be confident. And I tell these guys, even if your workout performance is not satisfactory, if you go into your training with that relaxed mindset, you're going to have a much better time, and it's going to be easier for you. And for some guys for guys who have porn addiction, or some guys who have issues, it's and I tell them, I said, or let's say they've, from excess masturbation, they've conditioned themselves poorly. I said, it's going to take a couple of weeks probably to transition. And during that transition period, the best thing you can do is accept that your performance during training is probably not going to be what you like. But as long as you can accept that, and put those feelings of frustration aside and just attempt to focus on those emotional visualization exercises, you start creating that conditioning. It's not just physical, it's that mental, emotional conditioning. Something will click along the way, and then you won't have to start practicing as hard to induce those emotions. And guess what will start to happen? That's when you see these guys have these turnarounds. I often see it. It's sometimes it's going into it takes a couple weeks, but by week 2, it's these guys have a breakthrough. It's hey, I wanted to work out today and I didn't have to focus. It just came to me naturally, and the workout went so well. And that's when you start seeing, that I guess breaking through that particular plateau.
Yeah.
And those to me are the most satisfying. Look, I think it's great when guys make size gains or whatnot, but when you have a guy who comes to you and he hasn't been able to perform, or he's been scared to do it, and a year later you're talking to this guy and he's engaged to be married and he's happy and he's he's living life to the fullest. I have complete sexual confidence. That is what makes it worth it.
Yeah. And it's that satisfaction. I mean, kind of just helping somebody along that journey, where it's from seeing something as being impossible to all of a sudden hey, you know what, this is my reality now.
Well, yeah, we live in very fertile times for that, because I think in no other time in history have we had so many luxuries and information, and yet probably we're more miserable than ever as a whole. And we need to challenge ourselves. Humans are creatures, we need to challenge ourselves. If we are not challenged, we grow weak. That's not just physically and mentally. So having something to sharpen your blade against, like they say, is always a good thing.
100%, man. Tell us more about Me Coach and where we can find you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I have a service. It's at maleenhancementcoach.com. This service, I provide coaching to it. And essentially what happens is they go to the site. I recommend they read through everything. And I'll say this up front, because I know that I'm a coach, and this is my profession. But for those listening, if you have doubts, do your research first. Do your research. If I have any potential clients, I want them to come to me when they're ready to train. I'd be happy to answer any questions beforehand. So what happens is a client will sign up and they will be instructed to fill out a new client interview. It's essentially a questionnaire. And then based on those responses, that's what starts the consult. And either I will supply routine then, or I'll contact the client if I have any, if some things require a little more clarity. But I'll use a premium service that we have as an example. With a premium service, clients, they get access to weekly calls if they want to, weekly chats. It's also an accelerated kind of program. It's if you want the no nonsense approach, you sign up for the premium service, you're going to get, very strict guidance on how things work. But yeah, so you're instructed in the members area. There's written, video, and pictorial exercise descriptions. There's routines, of course, but the feature of the coaching is the coaching itself. The content is great, but it's the coaching that matters. And my goal is to help clients not only reach their goals, but to transcend their limitations. And that's what the coaching service is about.
Tailor-made program, which is that's what I always, that's what I got a hard on about, it's because straight up, man, I'm like, if you don't have that, that's kind of where things will, kind of change. And that's kind of what I always talk about when you get coaching. And the specificity involved in that is that, hey, it's something catered or tailor-made for you, right? And that's where you make a difference. And that's where I think, a lot of people would probably accelerate their gains instead of going on the internet, trying to collect everything by themselves. It's like, hey, wait a minute. I could just talk to an expert who's been there, done that, and been doing this for, I don't know, 20 plus years.
Yeah, I get that. And, it's like, I've been asked, what's coaching service about? I say, well, it's kind of like what I explained, but it would be this, it's like a personal trainer. It's like, you have some people who want personal training for working out, it's, for weights or for martial arts, whatever. It's the same kind. Well, why does anyone seek out a personal trainer? To accelerate the learning curve.
100%. 100%. Well, Al, it's been a blessing. I know you do got to leave early today, so I'll let you, head out. But any other things you want to add to today's episode, man?
I just really thank you for having me on, and perhaps we could do this again. I liked it a lot. Thank you.
100%, man. I got more questions.
All right. We can set something up soon.
All right. For sure, man.
Thank you, brother.
All right. Later, guys, and I'll see you in the next episode. You know, man.